Alright everyone, today's video is how to kill your players in 5e. And this is going to be addressing all those concerns that DMs have of my combats are too easy, I can't challenge my players, the combats are impossible to balance. All those things will be answered here today. So the first question is, do I have it balanced correctly? And when you think about balance, you gotta think, this is not making the fight perfectly even. This is not a mirror match. This is, how do I get my monsters to the power level that I want? How do I scale them to the power level that I want? How do I effectively balance them against my desires for what the monster is going to be? You know, because when you have a scale, you have one side and the other. So on the one side you have your monster, and on the other you have the desired power, capabilities, challenge of the encounter. That's what you balance it to. You don't balance it to the party. Okay, the party is the part in the middle that's controlling the scale, but you balance it against your expectations for the encounter. So that's the first big misconception on balancing, is that some people think it should be an even match between the party and the monster, and it shouldn't. You should have monsters stronger than the party. So the second thing, real quick, is whenever you have a combat, you should have at least 5 monsters usually. If you have less than 5, it's not going to be as good, I think. And you know, sometimes you'll have 3 to 5, right? But you should always shoot for more than the party or equal to the party. And I like a 3-man game because it's a lot easier to kind of destroy the party in a 3-man game, because you know they'll be so outnumbered in the action economy and all this stuff, and it's just a lot easier from your end to destroy them. And so that's the first thing, is you want 5 monsters, and you want each of those monsters to be stronger than the party when compared against just the hit points and the attack in the armor class and that sort of thing. So you want the monsters raw, just baseline, to be stronger than your party. That way when your party compensates by using spells and abilities, it makes them feel very challenged without destroying them, without killing them. Because if you have the style of epic campaign, which is what I focus on, then a player death is a big deal, and it's a huge inconvenience to the DM. So you want to balance your encounters just right, so that it's a very, very hard encounter, but you want to try not to kill your players, and you want to leave them plenty of outs to escape combat, avoid combat, use their abilities wisely, use their plays wisely. You want to give them a lot of outs to be able to increase their odds of winning. So whenever you balance the dungeon, you design it where every encounter can and will be likely to hurt them severely. And then when they start playing, the more smart plays they do, they move things in their favor, and don't compensate for that. Don't make the further monsters harder for that, because then you're just making it impossible for them to win without you pulling punches. The goal is to pull as few punches as you can to balance correctly. But that's the first step of how to kill your players, is proper balance. Now the second step is basically using monsters effectively and wisely, because monsters are not idiots. While the players are going to have a huge tactical advantage because they have 3 brains, and each brain focuses on one player character, you have 1 brain, and you're running sometimes as many as 7 non-player characters. So that's going to severely limit your capabilities of spicing up the combat and making the enemy smart. But here's how you counteract that. You have a mega list of all the kind of moves and abilities that your monsters are going to whip out, and you build this list over time. You start with maybe 5 variations, including your basic ones. So just, you know, attack roll, spell attack, and ranged attack. And then you throw in 2 more. Let's throw in a trip attack so that the enemies can proc melee, and let's throw in a called shot on one of the archers, shooting for your leg. Okay, so now we've got 5 things, and we've started our mega thread, and we're going to expand this over time. And if we're expanding over time, we're going to grow familiar with using these secondary tactics, and it's just become second nature to us. It's so easy after you've expanded your list organically, because, you know, another example of this is, as a DM, when you start using monsters, I'm sure a lot of us are having the Goblin and the Wolf Sablock memorized, because we use it so often, and over time we just add monsters to our repertoire of ones we're familiar with and ones we have, you know, semi or fully memorized, and we can just throw those out there in a second. We can run them effortlessly because we've used them so much. And that's another reason high level play is difficult, because you haven't really used the monsters on that end nearly as much. which is why high level play is so hard to balance, because you know you've got all these huge numbers floating around and it just feels really weird because a lot of us play at lower levels. and it's part of the challenge of balancing a higher level game. But step one is balancing your encounter properly, making it harder for the PCs than it should be. Step two is using your tactics and playing your monsters wisely. Step three is picking the right monsters. So beyond just the number of monsters and the stats of those monsters, you've got to pick the right monster for the encounter. Like if they were in the sewers and there was a tribe of goblinoids and they're stealthy goblinoids, well, maybe don't have the bugbear be wearing chainmail and charging in like a maniac. Maybe have him swimming in the sewers with a giant coral snake. So that's a good way to bring in some interesting monsters that the party's not going to be able to account for, and use some smart tactics with the monsters. And beyond just the moves they use in combat, use tactics for these monsters, right? So give the goblins traps, give the kobolds inventions, give the bugbear sneak attack an advantage and a high chance to hit, make the coral snake's venom extremely toxic, make the hobgoblins march in lockstep and raise their shields to defend each other, giving them all a +4 bonus rather than the traditional +2 bonus. So use smart tactics like this to help kill your players the best way. And remember, when we say kill our players, we don't mean we want to kill you guys. We just mean we want to have a nice challenging combat where we can bring you to your knees, right? So step one is proper balance. Step two is smart moves, and step three is intelligent tactics. Now here's what I want you guys to do. I want you to go down in the comments and tell me, and in my Discord as well, and tell me about some of the smart monster tactics that you guys have used in your games. The other thing is I want you to share this and subscribe so that everyone can see the video. And a pro tip before I leave is that rogues, if you throw a rogue at your party, like the straight up player character class rogue, give them sharpshooter 2, that is going to annihilate your party. I had a combat where the players, it was at a noble ball, and they'd spent the evening infiltrating, and the session climaxed in an assault by the baddies' minions. And so the players started fighting them, but there was a third party involved, this rogue who was taking shots from up above. She had sharpshooter, and she had a couple of feats, and then it was like a 4th level rogue. She wasn't a high level rogue, but from her position, she was dominating the battlefield. She had complete control because she was just holding action. If someone moved out of cover, she would snipe them. And basically, she kind of just kept the party and the enemy monsters pretty balanced for the most part until it was just the party left, because she was wanting to interrogate them for information. It was a whole plot. It was actually a modified version of Waterdeep, and she was trying to get information on the Dragonstone. It's got some name like the Stone of Galore in the official manual. I don't use that. I just use Dragonstone because I can remember that. But basically, because of her positioning and the fact that rogues deal a lot of damage on hit, she was able to lock down the battlefield and have so much control. So throw a rogue at them. They're not going to really know how to deal with it unless they're able to get to the rogue, and then that's them playing smart. So anyways, goodbye, good luck, and have fun in your games.